October 26, 1909, early morning, at Harbin Station in Manchuria, China. The air is filled with fanfare from a Russian military band. Amid the music, a prominent figure steps onto the platform. Ito Hirobumi, one of Japan's most powerful statesmen. He has just arrived for a diplomatic meeting with high-ranking Russian officials. Suddenly, 3 shots ring out. Ito collapses to the ground. The shooter calmly raises his voice and declares, "Long live Korea! Hooray for Korean independence!" The incident makes international headlines overnight. Newspapers around the world report, "A Korean youth shoots Japan's national hero." But who was this man? Why did he do it? And how did he come to make such a life-or-death decision? Today, we follow the real story, hidden behind a single gunshot. In the late 19th century, the balance of power in East Asia began to shift. After Japan's victory in the First Sino-Japanese War, Korea, long under China's influence, caught the attention of Japan. Then, after winning the Russo-Japanese War, Japan established itself as the dominant power in the region, and Korea, it was reduced to a protectorate of Japan in all but name. At the center of these sweeping changes stood one man, Ito Hirobumi, a leading architect of modern Japan. Ito served as prime minister and helped draft the Meiji Constitution. But in Korea, he played a different role. In 1905, Ito orchestrated the Ulsa Treaty, stripping Korea of its diplomatic rights. He then installed himself as the first resident general, beginning Japan's de facto rule over the country. Ito forced King Gujong of Korea to abdicate, and by 1907, he had disbanded the Korean Imperial Army, leaving the nation unarmed and helpless. To the Korean people, Ito wasn't just a foreign governor. He was the very symbol of invasion and lost sovereignty. By the time he traveled to Harbin in 1909, Ito had stepped down as resident general, but his influence was far from over. He remained a powerful force in Japanese politics, and was now negotiating railway deals between Manchuria and Russia. Every move he made had the potential to shake the geopolitical balance of Asia. Standing against Ito Hirobumi was a young man named Ahn Jung-geun. He was born on September 2, 1879, in Haeju Hwanghae Province, Korea. His birth name was Ahn Jung-geun. At birth, he had 7 moles on his chest, arranged like the Big Dipper, so his grandfather named him after the constellation, believing he was born under a divine star. But as he grew up, his personality was said to be impulsive and light-hearted. His family hoped he would become more grounded and responsible, so they gave him a new name, Jung-geun, meaning deep roots and weight. His Christian baptismal name was Thomas. In his early years, Ahn was an educator and activist. He opened a school and joined a national campaign to help repay Korea's foreign debts. He believed in peaceful reform and enlightenment through education. But the world around him was changing, fast and brutally. After the Ulsa Treaty, Japan seized complete control of Korea's foreign affairs. Ahn realized that the pen was no longer enough to protect his country's sovereignty. In 1907, when Emperor Gujong was forced to abdicate, and the Korean military was dismantled by Japan, Ahn fled to the Russian Far East, where he began organizing a Korean independence militia. He engaged in armed resistance, fighting Japanese forces near Hamgyong province, and risking his life for Korea's freedom. Then, in 1909, he and 11 fellow fighters cut off their left ring fingers, wrote Korean independence in their own blood, and swore an oath. "We will not return home until our country is free." And at the end of that solemn vow, Ahn set his sights on one final target, Ito Hirobumi. In October 1909, news broke that Ito Hirobumi would soon arrive in Harbin. Ahn Jung-geun immediately left the Russian Far East, traveling with his comrades toward the city. At first, the plan was to target Ito at one of 4 stations along the route. But due to a shortage of men and time, they revised the operation, focusing all efforts on Harbin Station. October 26, 1909, 9 a.m., Harbin Station platform. A Russian military band stands ready to welcome Ito Hirobumi. Ahn Jung-geun waits among the crowd, disguised and alert. As he hears the shout, "Long live Prince Ito!" he recognizes his target. Calmly, he draws his Browning pistol and pulls the trigger. Ito is struck in the chest and abdomen and collapses. 3 members of his entourage are also wounded in the chaos. Ahn doesn't run. He raises the Korean national flag and shouts 3 times in Russian, "Korea, hurrah!" This was no act of blind violence. It was a message to the world that the spirit of a silenced nation was still alive, still resisting, and would no longer remain invisible. After his arrest, Ahn Jung-geun was handed over to the Japanese authorities and imprisoned in Lushan prison. In court, he stood not as a criminal, but as a soldier. He declared himself a lieutenant general of the Korean Resistance Army and insisted that his actions were those of a legitimate combatant in a war for his nation's independence. He listed 15 reasons for the execution of Ito Hirobumi, among them, orchestrating the assassination of Empress Myeongsung, stripping Korea of its diplomatic sovereignty, disbanding the Korean military, suppressing freedom of the press and expression, massacring civilians, destroying peace in East Asia. Ahn spoke firmly to the court. "As a soldier representing the Korean Empire, I executed the man who destroyed peace in the East." But the Japanese court rejected his defense. On February 1910, Ahn Jung-geun was sentenced to death. While in prison, Ahn Jung-geun began to write. The manuscript was titled, "On Peace in East Asia." In it, he proposed a bold idea, that Korea, China, and Japan must unite to resist the growing threat of Western imperialism. Ahn envisioned a shared currency, a joint military, and an international peace organization created by the 3 nations of East Asia. Ideas far ahead of their time, nearly unimaginable in the early 20th century. Though he had taken a life, Ahn wrote, "I killed the enemy, but what I truly seek is peace." His dream was not of revenge, but of coexistence and a future without war in Asia. But the Japanese authorities halted his writing. The manuscript was never completed, and his vision for peace remained unfinished. March 26, 1910, 10 a.m. Wearing white burial robes, Ahn Jung-geun stepped onto the gallows. To his younger brother, he spoke his final wish: "Please bring my bones back to my homeland. When the sound of Korea's independence reaches heaven, I will dance and shout hooray with joy." Although his body was supposed to be returned to his family, the Japanese authorities feared that such an act might inflame anti-Japanese sentiment and inspire further resistance among Koreans. Instead, they buried his remains in secret. To this day, the exact location of Ahn Jung-geun's true grave remains unknown. In its place, a symbolic tomb now stands in Hucheong Park in Seoul, a quiet tribute to a man whose final hope was not for revenge, but for the freedom of his people and the peace of East Asia. In China and Korea, intellectuals hailed Ahn Jung-geun as a righteous hero who fought for peace in East Asia. Chinese revolutionaries of the time, including Sun Yat-sen, Liang Qichao, and Yuan Shikai, publicly honored him, calling his actions courageous and visionary. But in Japan, he was branded a terrorist. His assassination of Ito Hirobumi became justification for a harsher stance toward Korea, and ultimately, for the full annexation of Korea in 1910. Despite this, Ahn Jung-geun is remembered today as one of Korea's most revered independence activists. His philosophy, rooted in peace, justice, and unity, continues to resonate across generations. In a world still marked by division and conflict, his message is being revisited in modern discussions on Korea-China-Japan relations and the future of peace in Northeast Asia. The gunshots that echoed through Harbin Station in 1909 have long since faded, but the cry for Korea's independence and the dream of peace in East Asia still live on. Ahn Jung-geun once said, "I hope that Japan and Korea will one day work together to achieve true peace in the East. His words are not just echoes from the past, but a question directed at us today. If you had lived in his time, as a citizen of occupied Joseon, what would you have chosen? Silence, compromise, or action?